Welcome everyone to my day 2 recap of what I'm calling the Cold Spark Infernalist. As you can see here, today, shorter day, but progressed up to tier 11 maps, which is what you can see here being demoed. For those that didn't see the day 1 recap or aren't aware of the build that I'm trying out, it's basically the Infernalist using the 10 stack demon form and using the main combination of Spark Cold infused with infusions from Frostbomb. So that's the two main skills being comboed, Spark and Frostbomb. It's further supplemented by Flame Wall and Orb of Storms. Thus far, the mapping experience through to T11 has been relatively painless. If we can have a look now, just a bit more demos before I actually dive in what transpired throughout the day. The Abyss Depths is a good example at the bosses, which can be quite tricky at the end. See how the build performs. Here we go. Things obviously don't insta-die, so it's not some giga broken setup at the moment, but it's definitely functioning quite well. As you can see here, the bosses do drop still pretty quickly. Likewise, if we jump to the end to the final map boss. One quick little tip I gave in the day 1 recap, which I'll repeat here, is pre-stacking your cold infusions before a boss encounter can be quite helpful. I did miss up my rotations a little bit on this boss. It didn't die quite as quickly as usual. Forgot the Sigil of Power at the start as well. But you can see moments when the cold infused sparks go off and the boss HP chunks. If you get a bit of good luck and have some of your chance to double effects and chance to drop double remnants, things from your passive tree trigger, you can get quite significant bursts. But that gives you an idea of how the build's performing. So, day 2. Finished the campaign, got into mapping. The very first thing I did, and that you'd want to do once you get into maps, is use the trade system, the new in-game trade system, which you can find through the menu here, the market panel. Is fantastic, and the number 1 priority always once you get into mapping is basically defense is king. There is a big XP penalty loss when you die once you get into mapping. I believe it's 10 or 15%, significant. If you keep dying, you're not going to get anywhere, so it doesn't matter what your DPS is unless you're got some broken one-shot build, which is just face rolling everything. But even then, there are moments where you may get caught by surprise. But defense is number 1, and the number 1 thing you want to do straight away is get your resistances as close as possible to 75. Chaos can be a little bit trickier, but Chaos is exceptionally good as well for the Infernalist Ascendancy due to this node and the extra physical damage reduction you get. That is another quick change which I'll highlight in regards to buffing up my defenses once I got into mapping. During the campaign, I was running this node just for a little bit of extra damage, basically. For lack of better options, you could probably run the Hound maybe, and that's probably it. During the campaign, this is almost useless because your resistances are just so low, and especially if you're fire resistances are poor, you're going to get no benefit pretty much from this. So trade, get your resistances up. Also, as running demon form, once you start getting higher in levels, the life regen does start to creep up and get more significant. My demon form at the moment is at level 18, and you can see the life loss there is 14.1. So at 10 stacks, it's 140 life regen. And I'm not even running at that at the moment, which if you go back and look at the gameplay demo again, the life regen is getting a little bit low again, so I need to do some updates, further updates soon to boost that up a little bit more, so it's a little bit more manageable. But you can manage it with the life flask, especially if you got your life behind a nice chunky energy shield. That's another thing. Did make some passive tree changes, and in general made a bit of a bigger focus on energy shield. I believe I made some changes to pick this up, even though the reduced mana is a little bit annoying, and got all of these energy shield nodes up here. Also, likewise, don't know if this is optimal again, so take this as a grain of salt, but went and working my way towards this faster start of energy shield as well here. Next thing I did, especially early on in mapping for defenses, I was a bit poor, as you will be when you first get into mapping, unless you get exceptionally lucky and get a divine drop during the campaign. But one thing I did play around with at the start and actually works well with demon form is I've put in this shield. Big chunk of fire resistance, bumps up your max fire resistance, which works well with that ascendancy point that I mentioned earlier, and you get a big chunk of life regen. And another thing very much worth pointing out is block chance on shields now in the 0.3 patch. Basically, your passive block, so 25% blocks everything except for certain telegraph boss abilities, I believe. So you do actually notice quite a substantial damage reduction by wearing a shield. You take a little bit of a hit to your DPS because you're missing out on level of all spells on a focus and spell damage modifiers, but the shield did help me a lot very, very early on in mapping. So that was the first step. Trade, get your defenses up, make a few changes to the passive tree if need be. Test out this shield if you can. I'd imagine it's pretty cheap on the trades league. So mapping. Next thing. So the mapping strategy that I did was, number one priority was navigate to boss maps as quickly as possible. The idea behind this is boss maps is where you get your higher tier level maps, and you want to get as high up in your map levels as possible. The higher the map levels, the better gear you get, the better gem levels you get, and most importantly early on is the more XP you get. So the quicker you progress, basically. The next thing you want to do after that, well, one quick point to mention about those boss maps is save your highest tier maps for those. One thing as well with your maps is, personally early on, is potentially even run maps without any mods on them if you're struggling. The idea is to progress up the tier of waystones or maps as quick as possible, as opposed to maximizing item rarity or drop chances and so forth. The next priority while you're navigating to those boss maps is, while doing so, also navigating towards corrupted areas. You can see the start of corrupted area here, because you want to clear those corrupted areas to get your Atlas points. On the topic of Atlas points, I personally just quickly at the start have prioritized basically waystone drop chance, and now I'm navigating towards strong boxes because I personally like strong boxes and find they give good value, but not necessarily recommending that. There's probably much better YouTube guides out there with recommendations on what to do with that. Next point, I did spend some time playing around with trying out the new Archon buff notables. I have another video out there, so I won't go into too much detail, but I'll say the too long didn't read version of it is that there is a significant downtime between when you can get the buff, called the active recovery period, and it's 20 seconds. So unless you invest a lot of points in reducing that, as well as potentially needing it on gear, the uptime of that buff, considering the amount of point investment that you need to get it, is just not worth it. So personally, don't try that. Other little quick points on gear. A very cheap anointment for your amulet early on is heavy ammunition. Basically, the reduced attack speed doesn't affect us at all because we're doing spells. It's not, Spark isn't an actual attack. So, but it is a projectile, so you get the full 40% increased projectile damage. So it's a very, very cheap anoint. If you probably do 1 or 2 delirium maps, or if you just use a trade site, it's one of the cheapest anoints you can get, and you just get a flat 40% increase on your spark and any other projectile skills. A little bit later into my mapping, just before I finished the day, I crafted this. Big shout out to Captain Lance. I just, by chance, I follow his channel, and just near the end of the day, noticed he uploaded a video on his progress, and he recommended or highlighted a very overpowered way of crafting very good focuses. As you can see here, level of all spell skills +3. Typically, when focuses drop, they can only roll a maximum of +2. However, I won't go into too much detail. I actually provide a link to his video so that he gets credit and the views for it. But the very short of it is, you basically use this essence, which guarantees a +3 level to all spell skills. And what you actually do with this is, it says it removes a random modifier. However, since +3 level to all spell skills can only roll on a suffix, if you have, all your suffixes full, so all 3 suffixes, the bottom 3, so here's suffix, if you got all 3 of these full, and it needs to add a +3 level of spell skills, then it actually needs to remove a suffix in order to be able to plug that +3 level of all spell skills on. So what you can do is you can actually go to the trade site and get a focus with a lot of spell damage, or any other prefixes you want, ideally, for very, very cheap, because focuses without spell levels are ridiculously cheap. So you just do a, for instance, I'll just do it very quickly. You get a focus, say here, you do a weighted sum of spell damage with, I'm running a cold spark build, so I want cold damage, and say we want combined like 150, let's say, of that. And you can see here they're listed for like 1 exalted orb, and you can just get a ridiculous amount of spell damage. You ideally want to try and get 3 suffixes that you'd be happy with, and then one of them will get re-rolled upon using that essence into the +3 levels, and you just get a very, very good focus. I actually did this on 2 focuses, foci, just in case a suffix, I didn't want to spend too much currency getting absolutely perfect roll on suffixes, so basically had to do a bit of RNG, but this one ended up being the better of the 2, and I actually sold the other one for about 3 or 4 times the investment cost of the essence in the first place. So actually made a bit of currency on top of that. That pretty much wrapped up my second day. Like I said, T11 maps was a bit of a shorter day, and I did spend some time doing a bit of trading, crafting, and testing out things, as well as making another video. So didn't have to spend too much time, but the next plan is to obviously get up to T15 maps. One thing I also want to test quickly is this Spell Slinger skill, which you can get on dueling wands. Seems really, really great in that it's basically a free, as in no spirit reservation meta skill. So you can put in another, let's go quickly, gems, and let's just say, no, I wouldn't be using snap probably, but you put that in and you get that resurrection for free, and it builds up energy as you just cast things. So it is a completely free meta ability if you get a dueling one. So that's one thing I want to play around with. But the main thing in terms of the progression of the build, so far, just as is, without any real major refinement or theory crafting or any complicated theory crafting, it is progressing, I dare say, very painlessly through maps, and I suspect it will through to T15. Beyond that, in terms of maximizing its potential, what I suspect I will be doing is going for a low life crit build. The Ascendancy, really, that is what it is set up for the most part. So getting the 4th Ascendancy point, getting Grinning Immolation, using 1 reservation, and then I can't remember what the unique belt name is, but there is a belt which allows you to get into low life when you're just at 75% life. So with 1 reservation taking off 25% of your life, that belt plus 1 of these reservations is enough. So it'll basically be something along the lines of these nodes that are already selected, maybe using Spirit instead, and Grinning Immolation may path down to here. We're pretty close anyway, and get Pain Attunement, so it's another 30% crit bonus, so 30% there and 50% there. That is an 80% more crit damage bonus, and then there's a whole bunch of crit nodes around here, I believe somewhere around here. I won't dive into it too much. There will obviously be a lot of playing around in terms of tweaking the passive tree to set that up, but that is where I suspect I will head to try and squeeze the most out of the build and see what it can do. Anyway, that's it for today. Like, subscribe, helps out the channel, and enjoy. All the best.